Sage Wanderer here, and this is the story of how my uncle burned people alive. Don't. So, if you watch this channel, you know that I have a crazy uncle. He's gone now. I had a crazy uncle, a crazy criminal uncle, really, honestly. Well, let's just put it this way. He didn't let a little thing like the law get between what he wanted, between him and what he wanted. And so in the late 60s and early 1970s, the hippie movement down in California, you know, the flower child, Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco hippie thing, it was starting to break up for various reasons. The big part of it is that the scene in California was getting more and more militant, kind of like it is nowadays. And the true hippies that were just all about peace, love, and making love under the stars, you know, and smoking weed and tripping on mushrooms, you know, they exited the scene out of California and started moving north, and ended up, many of them, here in Oregon. And this is how Oregon was transformed from a logging community, a logging-based culture with, you know, really it's just a northwestern version of cowboys. Loggers and cowboys are about the same, you know, and rough and tumbled men, wilderness area, so guns and outdoor living were a part of life here. But this place became transformed in my lifetime by these Haight-Ashbury hippies who migrated to the north from California. And so they ended up, many of them came to a little town in the Willamette Valley of Oregon here called Silverton. Silverton is a foothills town with some of the purest and best water on the planet. And it's honestly a beautiful place to live, and my dad pastored a church there off and on for years. He would leave and then come back and leave and come back. And so I have a history in Silverton. And so when I was a little kid, these hippies found Silverton, and they loved that this little silver stream ran through the middle of town. It was just such a beautiful little town. And the people there were very sweet, nice, older, retired people, a lot of them. And so they just kind of welcomed the hippies in. But before you knew it, I mean, for a while there, right in downtown Silverton in Silver Creek, and it's one of the reasons why you can't go down to Silver Creek anymore in town. You used to just be able to jump the guardrail, go down and fish in Silver Creek. But now it's closed for fishing, and you can't get down there anymore because when the hippies invaded Silverton in, I think, about 1972, they were naked and swimming right in the middle of town. That they just set up camp right on this river in town, and the police ran them out of town to the edge of town as far as they could. The county sheriff left them alone, and they were just camped out everywhere. And if you followed my story in my channel, you know my sister, who was a young teenager then, ran off and joined the hippies. And so I got an up close and personal look at a lot of these hippie camps while searching for my sister. Now, I have this crazy uncle who, if you want to know about him, go back and look at a video called, I think it's called My Gold Mining Expedition, or something like that. It's a story time with Uncle Sage. You'll find it in that folder. And anyway, I tell this story about my uncle in there, about how he almost shot me once. Just out of spite. He was a mean man. My uncle was a mean man, and he didn't take crud off of nobody. And he did not like these hippies. He did not care for their influence into our state and into our areas. And we were following him home from a fishing trip one day on a Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. And we're coming back to his place to clean the fish and get my mother, when there was this fork in the road above Silverton on the way to Silver Falls. And when you took that fork in the road, you went up the road that my uncle lived on, and his house was the very first house up that road, which is probably a half a mile from this split in the road. This split in the road was actually a small graveled area, and then this big open field right there where these two roads met. It was kind of unclaimed. It might have been owned by the Department of Transportation or something like that. But these hippies had parked a big school bus on that gravel section, and then encircled it like with wagons with old beat up cars and VW bugs. And they had a big fire in the middle, and they had a big tarp set up over it, and they were just camped out there and had just taken that over right next to his house. He didn't take to that very well at all. And this gives you an idea about the calm and sanity of my uncle. We pulled up, and he got out of his car. and he walked into their camp. And of course, everybody was like, "Hey, how's it going?" You know, because they're hippies. They're peace-loving hippies. And he just looked around and he said, "You guys got quite a camp here. You intending on staying?" And, of course, the general attitude was, "Oh, we don't know. We kind of like it here. Probably. At least for a while. You live around here?" And he said he never answered their questions. That was one of the craziest things about my uncle. He just felt no obligation whatsoever to respond to your inquiries at all. He would just kind of look at you and then say what was on his mind and just completely ignore that you were talking to him at all. It added to a little crazy persona that he had going on for sure. And so they asked him if he lived around there, and they're being friendly, and he just looks around the group and looks at the man who was talking to him, and he goes, "If I was you, I wouldn't be here in the morning. Being here in the morning would be a really bad thing for you. I would hate to think what would happen to you guys if you were still here in the morning." And they were like, "Hey, bro, you threatening me? Hey, dude, you threatening us? What is that? Is that a threat?" And he goes, "Nah, just some friendly advice. If I was you, I wouldn't be here in the morning." And then he just walks off. So we go back. And of course, this is we follow him back, and this is a big bone of discussion. And my uncle says, "I'm going to kill all them hippies. I'm going to go down there, and I'm going to set their camp on fire. And when they come running out of the bus, I'm going to shoot the survivors. You can't come into my neighborhood and set up camp. I don't appreciate them. They don't belong here. They aren't from around here, and they need to go back to where they came from. And I gave them a warning. And if they're still here in the morning, I'm going to kill them all." And of course, my dad, the preacher, saying, "Look, man, you can't do that. You can't go around killing people. You can't." And his wife, my aunt, she was begging with him, "Come on now, come to your senses." And he's like, "No, I got kids here, and the people down there, they're naked and dirty. They probably won't try to rape my children. I don't know, they're thieves probably, and they have no business being up here, and they need to go on back to California, or they're going to end up dead." And there was just no shaking him. So we went home late at night after arguing with my uncle all night long on behalf of these poor hippies. And I'm laughing because of his absolute disdain for any rule of law. Like, he just did not give a flip. It was his law, and everybody else could just blow it. He just wouldn't go. He just didn't care. He did not give a flip. Antisocial for sure. My uncle lived his own way, and the fact that he survived to die of old age and cancer, or rather, that uncle died of emphysema, that he lived to die of COPD slowly was just, it never ceases to amaze me how he really. Let me tell you some other things about my uncle before I get to the end of the story. That he was well known for bringing people into a business arrangement with him and working the business arrangement in his favor. And if they didn't like it, some of his business partners disappeared along with their car. And without ever actually confessing to these crimes, my uncle let me know that there was a lava tube up there in the Oregon mountains, not far above Salem, that was in the Cascades up by Detroit Lake, that was bottomless. And you could drive a car right up to the edge of it and drive a car right down into this bottomless lava pit, and it would just go on forever. And, no one was ever going to find a car that was driven into this lava tube. If you can imagine a cave big enough to drive a car into with a hard edge and a pathway going right up to it. And so the next morning was Sunday morning, and like every other Sunday morning, we got up early on Sunday to go pick up people for church. And my little cousins at my uncle's house was one of our first stops. We went to the mountain, and we got my cousins to go to church. And typically, it was my mother, but because of some other previous arrangement, or maybe she was sick, I don't recall, but my dad was forced to go up to the mountains to get my cousins. And as we went up, we came to the fork of the road, and there were the hippies. And I gotta say, they were a pitiful sight. Their camp was still burning. Their bus was burnt out, just completely gutted, and still smoldering and burning and on fire. And they had moved their camp away from where all the fire had consumed things to one of the vehicles that survived the flames. And they were treating each other for burns and cuts and bruises, and they were picking through the rubbish, trying to find, you know, bits and pieces of their life to put back together, because someone had come into their camp in the night, doused their bus in gasoline along with most of the other vehicles and anything that would burn, and set it on fire while they were sleeping. And so my dad, knowing right away that if my uncle came back and these people were still there, that he was going to kill them all. He was going to kill them all and just cover the scene up. And you know, this was a different time when people didn't put up with crap from other people. And, you know, I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying that's the way it was. And so my dad got out of the car and he went over and he told them, look, you know, you guys need to get, if you're still here when I come back, you know, you're just not very smart. You know, that crazed man came along last night and threatened you, and you guys decided to stick around here, and now he's going to kill you all if you don't leave and go back to where you came from. You mean, you guys aren't very smart. If I was you, I would climb onto what remains of your vehicles and get out of here. So we went up to the house to get the kids. And of course, there was a big discussion about the morality of what he just did, and that, of course, he denied doing it. You know, he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't have nothing to do with that. Of course, that's the standard MO, is, you know, make a veiled threat, do the crime, and then deny you have anything to do with it. And since they didn't have any witnesses, and what local cop's going to believe a bunch of hippies in a school bus from California anyhow, and what's left of their school bus. When my dad came back, I guess they'd gotten the old school bus running somehow. They had just burned out the back and it was still running, because when we came back with the kids to go to church, they were all gone. There was no sign of them. And my dad got out of the car just to, I don't know, survey the damage and look at it. And when he did, laying there in the burning embers, still smoldering debris, he saw a glint of metal. And he kind of kicked at it and kicked it out of the coals, and it was still almost red hot. But it was a very unique K-bar Marine Corps style fighting knife with aftermarket turtle shell grips. And although it had been burned, the turtle shell grips survived, everything survived, and the knife was hot. But it was still an excellent blade, and I think maybe it got tempered a little more, because that knife was my dad's constant companion for the rest of his life. That was the old man's choice K-bar, and I kind of grew up with that knife in our house that he found in the remnants of the hippie compound that my uncle full-on burned down, and he never saw justice for it. No one was killed, and honestly, I think they were lucky, because he was the kind of man that would kill you, bury your body in the woods or throw it down a lava tube, and then go on and have lunch and never think twice about it. Those kind of people still exist, I think, but maybe they're less common. But that's the scary, frightening, weirdo story of the time my uncle set a camp full of hippies on fire. I don't know that they went back to California. I don't know that that kind of thing actually works in stopping people from doing what they want to do, but by golly, I guess it made him feel better. And I can't believe my uncle did all of these things and survived, and never saw justice. And I know there were some accusations, but then people came up missing. He was a bit of a gangster. All right, God save our republic.